When a strong idea and faultless execution come together, they can turn a fun game into an all-time great. And a single gameplay mechanic that sees the marriage of those things can lift the core loop of an entire game to unimaginable heights. In an industry that's as reliant on iteration and imitation as this one, we don't often see mechanics that stand out in memory. But thankfully, talented developers shine through every now and then to deliver something truly special. Here, we're going to talk about some of our favorite gameplay mechanics from recent years. Leviathan Axe, God of War. Replacing the Blades of Chaos with an entirely new weapon in 2018's God of War was a bold move. But more than anything else, it was a statement. A statement that the series was going in a completely new direction, untethered from the past. And to back up such a strong statement, SIE Santa Monica had to ensure that the new Leviathan Axe would be an equally iconic weapon in its own right. They chose to do that by essentially turning it into Thor's Mjolnir, with Kratos having the ability to throw then magically summon his axe, and it was an absolutely genius move. In both combat and puzzles, God of War leveraged this genius mechanic to great aplomb, allowing the Leviathan Axe to carve out a place for itself in the hearts of all series fans. Climbing and Gliding, The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. Exploring the massive open world of Hyrule in Breath of the Wild is an unforgettable experience, and the one thing that defines that is the game's traversal. Link can climb almost any surface in the entire game, and can use that ability to climb to vantage points, spot points of interest in the distance, and jump off great heights to soar in the air using his glider. It's a ridiculously strong loop that carries the entire game. Already, we've seen a few imitators with recent games like Immortals, Phoenix Rising, and Genshin Impact, and we have no doubt that we'll see many more in the years to come. ATB, Final Fantasy VII Remake. Final Fantasy as a series has been trying to strike the perfect balance between turn-based battles and action-oriented combat for a few years now, and with Final Fantasy VII Remake, it finally found the right recipe. It did that by tweaking the series' well-known ATB mechanic in an absolutely ingenious way. Tying healing, spells, and abilities to the ATB gauge while allowing players to freely switch between characters meant that the game essentially turned into a turn-based affair, with a downtime between the menu-based commands characterized by real-time action. It makes for one of the strongest combat systems we've ever seen in a Final Fantasy game. Baton Pass, Persona 5 Royal. There are many who argue that turn-based combat in games feels too static and slow, but even the biggest naysayers can't help but be wowed by Persona 5's combat, which injects a ton of dynamism into every fight through the use of multiple interacting mechanics. One of the best of those mechanics is the Baton Pass, which adds another layer on top of the one more mechanic, while improvements introduced in Persona 5 Royal add even more depth into it by tying it into social and slice-of-life mechanics. Web swinging, Marvel's Spider-Man. The web swinging in Marvel's Spider-Man is a textbook example of brilliance in simplicity. Essentially, traversal in the game boils down to simply holding R2 and releasing it with the correct timing, and yet it feels so good. Every single movement and every action has weight to it, owing to the fact that the swinging is very much physics-based, while incredible animations and additional flourishes like the web zip ensure that things don't ever get too monotonous. Parrying, Sekiro Shadows Die Twice. After perfecting the slow and deliberate combat of the Souls games in Bloodborne, From Software tried something completely different with Sekiro Shadows Die Twice, and in doing so ended up crafting one of the most brilliant melee combat systems we've ever had the pleasure of playing. Blocks, parries, and posture come together to ensure that every fight in Sekiro feels kinetic, challenging, and every victory incredibly satisfying. Turf Wars, Monster Hunter World. Monster Hunter World introduced a number of improvements and changes to the Monster Hunter formula to bring it to its zenith, and the one that stands out in memory is Turf Wars. Watching two monsters engage each other in furious duels is as exciting to witness as you'd think, and adds a whole new layer of dynamism and believability to the world, and of course, the beasts of Monster Hunter World. Glue Cannon, Prey. On paper, the glue cannon, a weapon that deals no real damage and instead only traps enemies in, well, glue, might not seem like much, but it is easily the best tool you will find in all of Prey. It is one of the most versatile weapons in the game, and constantly encourages experimentation, from dealing with environmental hazards to essentially allowing you to create entirely new paths to traverse, to getting to previously inaccessible areas, to navigating your surroundings in completely new ways. Mr. X, Resident Evil 2. Resident Evil 2 is already a pretty scary game, with its cramped, dark corridors, its shambling zombies, and enemies like lickers. But when you throw Mr. X into the mix as well, he touches completely new heights. Stalker enemies have been a major part of horror experiences for a long time, but very few have had the constant and overbearing presence that Mr. X does throughout RE2. From running down corridors in a panic as he rushes your direction, to silently cowering in a corner of a room while you listen to his thumping footsteps as he roams the halls of the RPD. This sharply dressed giant is a constant menace. Dialogue system, Red Dead Redemption 2.
Hey there! Hey there! Look out! Howdy.
Hey, partner.
Messing about in the impressive open world of Red Dead Redemption 2 is an obvious part of the game's appeal. And while robbing trains and getting into massive firefights is, of course, a big part of the aspect of the game, what's even more engaging is simply interacting with the NPCs. Red Dead 2 employs a unique dialogue system, which seems simple on paper, seeing as you only ever get two choices for how you want to talk to someone, but hides a surprising amount of depth owing to how contextual it is. Whether you're cheesing the honor system by saying, "Hey there, mister," on a loop to every person that passes you, or needlessly harassing an NPC by constantly antagonizing them until they complain about you to the law, interacting with NPCs in Red Dead 2 is never not fun. Chipset upgrades, NIER Automata. NIER Automata does a lot of unusual things in ways that you wouldn't expect. Take the chipset upgrade system, for instance, which is far from an ordinary upgrade mechanic. Every system of the androids you play as is governed by this system, which includes something as simple as the UI and things such as your map and health bar. Hell, you can even unplug your OS chip for a hilariously quick and easy game over screen. Splatoon Squids, Splatoon. Splatoon is a game that is built on weird and offbeat ideas, but the way it handles reloading of weapons is simply genius. It might seem like a simple idea on paper, but transforming into a squid and swimming through ink to reload your weapon is such a fun idea. Additionally, it also plays a big role in traversing the game's maps, lending it even greater depth. Capturing, Super Mario Odyssey. All of Super Mario Odyssey is basically built around this one single mechanic, allowing players to throw Mario's cap on enemies and even inanimate objects to possess them is as ridiculous as it sounds. From Mario mainstays like Goombas to inanimate objects like a tree, from humans in New Donk City to an actual freaking T-Rex. Everything that Mario captures has its own unique movement and abilities. It's what paves the way for the unbridled variety and creativity that Odyssey exhibits on a constant basis. Social Strand System, Death Stranding. Death Stranding may not have created a whole new genre like Hideo Kojima had hoped it would, but there's little doubt that it's one of the most unique open-world games ever made. Its asynchronous multiplayer, dubbed the Social Strand System by Kojima, is a huge reason for that. From simple actions like giving likes to ropes and ladders left behind by other players, to working together with players that you never see to create an entire system of roads or zip lines. It's an incredibly powerful system that transforms the entire experience. Guiding Wind, Ghost of Tsushima. Traversal and exploration in open-world games tends to be rather generic most of the time, especially in today's day and age. But Ghost of Tsushima's take on open-world exploration is definitely an exception. The Guiding Wind is a simple mechanic on paper. Instead of following waypoints or a compass or markers, you summon a gust of wind that blows in the general direction of your destination. But though it may sound simple, it grounds players in the game's world to a great effect. And that about does it for this video. If you enjoyed what you watched and want to see more from Gaming Bolt, you can always hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell icon next to it. That way you will never miss any of our videos.